both particularly on the commercial corridor, and we want them to rebuild as fast as and quickly as possible. But we also want a standard for the city of Lynn Haven, and I think this will help give us some direction. So Amanda, if you'll come forward and discuss some of the things that we talked about in previous workshop, and then refresh the commissioners' memory so we can move forward from there.
Yes, hello. The last time we had the workshop, I brought some things to you. What I brought to you were a copy of the CRA, the current CRA storefront design guidelines. And they are the guidelines that we have in place right now, but only for the CRA area. I also brought you a copy of our corridor overlay layer that we have in place currently. It's not as stringent as the CRA guidelines. It's not as broad. It doesn't have as many requirements in there. That's for Highway 77 only and 390. And one of the questions that I left with you at that time was whether one of the options would be to apply the CRA guidelines to the whole of the city. Instead of having, the CRA area saying one thing, the corridor overlay saying something else, and then the other streets not even being referred to at all, you could just choose one thing, and the CRAs are already in place, and you could apply them to everything. I also brought to you the last time, the guidelines from Orange County. But I didn't bring you the actual section of the code. So this time in your packet, I told you that I would bring you the actual code sections. And I'm just going to go over a few things that are in there. And from what I found when I was taking a look at it, is some of the things are actually covered in the CRA. Now, I don't know whether, and this would be a Ben question later on, when you decide what it is you want, whether we could make adjustments to those guidelines that are already in the CRA. So we could basically use the CRAs, maybe add some things, and then apply it to the whole of the city. So this time I have given you the architectural standards and guidelines for commercial buildings and projects according to the Orange County codes. And I also gave you some more pictorial examples of the 3 architectural styles that are currently required within the CRA, because Mayor, if you remember, I didn't include any Spanish Mediterranean revival. So in this packet, you do have examples of frame vernacular, classic revival, and the Spanish Mediterranean revival. And I think when you look through them, you can see, you can think of buildings that are in the city that do actually fit all of those. So first of all, I'm just going to have a quick run through a few points of the Orange County. And again, just to highlight a few things. One of the first things that it does with the standards and guidelines is it sets out the intent and purpose. So for me, this is kind of like your goals, which is why on that question sheet, I put the first question as, for you all to think about really, what are your goals with these workshops? So what is it that you want to achieve through these workshops? In the guidelines here, I'm going to read a couple of these to you from Orange County. And I think that these are probably the same things that we're looking for, but that's up to you. These design guidelines shall promote architectural and site design treatments that enhance the visual appearance of development within the county, as administered by the planning division. That's something else that I would like for you to think about, because some cities and counties have an architectural review board that when somebody basically submits their building plans to the city, they would also be required to submit their design renderings with the measurements of how they meet the requirements. When we ask for projections or recesses and roof treatments, we could either look at those in-house, or you could set up an architectural review board. Some places have a downtown improvement board, a design review committee, or a corridor improvement board. So that's just something else for you all to think about, is how you would like to have this administered. Another goal, to maintain and enhance the attractiveness of the streetscape and the existing architecture in the community. So that's the existing. To create and maintain a strong community image and identity by providing for architectural treatments that enhance the visual experience of commercial development, and to require articulation that reduces the mass scale and uniform appearance of large commercial buildings and ensures that commercial buildings and projects incorporate architectural features that provide visual interest while allowing design flexibility. And I'm thinking of the grocery outlet. With that one that I just mentioned, because we were just saying, we don't want just a wall with no like design features or whatever there. So for me, okay, that's kind of like the goals, The next section is basically where. So the next thing you want to think about is, where do you want to apply these? Which land use districts do you want to apply these in? And also, do you want it just to be general commercial, or would you want to also include other types of retail or professional offices, other types of buildings? So basically anything other than residential. So, have a think about that, because right now all we have is a storefront program in the CRA. So that's like the goals, and then the where, which districts or which type of developments. The next section I kind of think of as like who. So do you want it to apply to new development, or new development and redevelopment, plus renovation of an existing building? That perhaps in Orange County, they say buildings that change more than 50% of a primary or secondary facade. So if they're just making, minor changes, then it doesn't apply. But if they're going to be making changes that affect more than 50%, then they do have to. And then also building expansions that are greater than 50% in gross floor area, also in Orange County, have to have these applied to them. And it says here, compliance with the standards set forth in this article shall be demonstrated by submittal of architectural drawings and elevations of all sides and a site development plan or site improvement plan in accordance with this chapter. And it refers to a development review. Oh, here it says any decision by the manager of planning division. So the planning director looks at it to approve it, but it can be appealed by going to a development review committee. Following that, we just go on to the various things that are addressed, such as the building orientation, landscaping, architectural styles, landscaping. I don't know whether you're all happy with the landscape section of the ULDC, or whether you would perhaps like to have a workshop also to address the landscaping and also signage. And that's another question that I put on your sheet, because I think that would be a separate workshop. Once you've decided on the other pointers, then perhaps we could meet, and you could look at whether you think that the current landscaping plan is adequate, or whether you would like to see more trees and more plantings. Just about finished here. Yeah, and then we have things like shopping cart screenage. What kind of materials can be used? For instance, in here, they don't allow metal buildings. In the CRA plan, they allow some types of metal buildings, but not corrugated or shiny. Decorative finishes. And then in Orange County, and I quite like this, any side of an office, commercial or industrial building visible from and adjacent to residential areas shall be treated in the same manner as a secondary facade. So they're also thinking about maybe not, commercial properties that are on real thoroughways or thoroughfares, but any that a residential developer, a house has to look at, a family dwelling unit. If they have to look at one, then they have to apply these also, so that they've got an attractive look to them. So that's basically what I have for you. Those are just kind of points for discussion, so that you can start thinking about what it is you really want to do, where you want to do it, who you want to have do it, and any ideas that you have, or anything that you would like me to follow through with. If you would like me to if there are things that you like about the Orange County one that we don't have in the CRA one, or things you'd like to have taken out of the CRA one, I'm quite happy to work on that, or work with Ben with that, if we are allowed to change the CRA.
If Mayor, one of the reasons that I want to keep in mind that we're doing this is not just to say we can do this, so let's do it. We're I believe, going to experience, and I think the numbers will back me up on this, we're going to experience a large amount of growth over 25 years coming up here. There's going to be a lot of people coming in. There's going to be a lot of buildings being thrown up. There's going to be a lot of, as the Air Force Base rebuilds, a lot of new people into town. And I want to make sure we're ahead of the curve on this growth is really where we're at. We don't want to look back in 20 years and say, you know what, we really should have put some guidelines down before we just had a hodgepodge of buildings all up and down 77 and 390. When we will be a full city at that point, I believe, on both corridors, all the way to 231. So, let's just keep in mind of what we want to see, I think, for our home. This is our home at the end of the day. And just like we take it very seriously with our personal houses, I think we need to take this very seriously on, not that we're not, but on how we want our city to look. So, and whether or not we're actually going to put some teeth to some of this stuff.
I totally agree with what you're saying, Commissioner, and I think that we're already, all of us experience that now, looking at 77, seeing what happened over the past couple of decades. It's jokingly called Hamburger Alley or something like that, and so I think that that's very forward thinking. And I would just throw out one idea that I think we could do very quickly that would be pretty easy to do, is if everybody likes what we've already started with the city, the cream and the Spanish roof color that we've already adopted in our signage and all, if we could sort of throw that out to new businesses as they're coming in, and even like a business like Walmart, when they get ready to repaint or re-roof or whatever, we could say very cordially, would you consider being part of our look? And would you repaint in this way? And would you be a good neighbor as we go forward? But color would be a way to unite it very quickly, just like repainting a house. And at the same point, not be too offensive to people about cost. Just a thought.
Yep. And I'm all for new growth, not so much the existing buildings, but like the Orange County regs say here, anything over 50%, maybe you'd have to change that. Buildings that are here that are built, they're obviously going to be grandfathered in until they need 50% or more change done to their building. But my thought process as we're talking out loud is like 1,000 feet off the side of each main corridor. 77 and 390 is pretty much what we're looking at there right now for those two main corridors. So it wouldn't really affect residential. It's more about any building commercial wise that's being put up, whether it's office or retail or whatever it may be. I think it needs to fall within those parameters.
I would like to see, if we're going to consider doing this, that it's not just 1,000 foot off of the corridor. I think it needs to be any commercial, whether professional business or commercial property within the city limits ought to have to adhere to it. That way, if it's in the industrial park or somewhere else, they're not going to put up something ugly. And maybe the industrial park's a different thing since it's an industrial park. But if somebody comes on 390 and puts in a new doctor's office, I'd like to see him put something decent there. But I contend, and I've made this comment before, that we need to know what our rules are now, and we need to enforce all of them. I mean, I know of two different businesses that I can think of off the top of my head. One of them has a parking issue that hasn't been addressed, and another one has outdoor merchandising, which is not allowed in the CRA. It has not been addressed. And I hate to enforce something on a business, but again, it's, everybody has to follow the rules. If they don't follow the rules, then it's not fair to the rest of the people that are following the rules. So whatever we do, we need to make sure it's very clear and there cannot be any misunderstandings of what the rules are. So, but I agree. I think we need to do something. I mean, otherwise, like the mayor said, we're going to in a worse situation than we already are.
So I guess our next step then would be possibly to take these steps, this punch list that we have here, maybe narrow that down to 3 or 4 ideas for each one. And then, we'll just continually narrow this down until we have kind of a punch list of where we want to go, I guess. I mean, do you guys agree, or what do y'all think?
Could I even ask the city attorney, maybe just one thing that I was thinking of is so that we could start moving immediately instead of having to spend weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, coming up with a huge document. Would it be possible for us to maybe discuss a small piece and approve a small piece at a time? In other words, we're moving towards a goal of several ordinances, but if we could start and not just because I said color, but whatever it would be, whether it's trees or whether it's color or whether it's a type of a roof, something, and go ahead and ask to put that on the next agenda for public reading and public discussion and maybe a vote, and kind of get pieces of it approved at a time so we're moving forward. Is that possible, or is it better to wait till we have an entire package?
It's possible, yes, Mayor. I don't know. I tend to think that it would be nice to have a whole package,
In place?
top to bottom, before we did it. But if that's not the will of the commission, then we can certainly piecemeal it based off of the directive given by this commission.
Mayor, if I may
Sure.
suggest, Ms. Richard has come up with some questions. I would probably suggest, I would like to suggest that maybe we go through and answer these questions and tell her what we want. I mean, I know that I can go through all 4 of these bullet points and tell you what I would like to see.
Yep.
And then maybe that would give her the guidance, or, give the city the guidance on where to go.
To start.
And one of the things that I could do, if you all did that, and I don't think this process would take too long, if you all did that, then I can look at what we have already. And then I can also look, if you like the Orange County, I can also look at that. And I could put something together that incorporated all of that and then give it to you so that you could look at it and see what you liked and what you didn't like, and you could change that, and then we could get an ordinance out of that.
Sounds like a plan.
I agree with the mayor. I don't want to drag our feet too long. Let's move while the getting's good, so to speak.
The question that I have, though, is what would we do about the CRA? I mean, would we be able to make a new thing applicable, or would we want to make it for the CRA, make it city-wide, or would the CRA still keep its separate thing, and this would be for outside the CRA?
That's going to depend on what the commission wants. I don't see that as an inhibitor one way or the other. Just if we want to adopt the same CRA standards, and that I don't see why that's an issue.
Well, because if we're going to change, we're going to add things. If we're going to change the CRA ones in any way for the CRA area, is that something we're allowed to
Well,
do?
then we'll have to bring that back before the CRA board and get it
CRA
approved.
board.
But
Okay.
it's no different than bringing the ordinances before this commission, in my opinion.
Okay.
There's nothing saying, I mean, the current regulations on the CRA were put in place by the CRA and the city, and they can be amended from time to time as necessary.
Thank you.
I have one other question before we start answering questions. Ben and I've had this discussion many times since I've been mayor about the Florida Avenue corridor, which all of us apparently are on the same page of wanting it to be kind of the historical center now, and trying to develop it. I would hope that maybe even as we change things, that we would keep in mind that maybe Florida Avenue could always possibly be the exception, because of the fact that it will probably eventually be mostly pedestrian. It will hopefully have lots of little outdoor places to eat, maybe, that kind of different setbacks. There's some residential, there's some, there's a mixture of business, commercial, churches, everything on that street. So I think that we need to keep in mind as we go forward that maybe Florida Avenue, the center of Lynn Haven, would possibly be an exception to whatever we do. So just a thought.
Make a historic district or something,
Yeah.
So if we're going to start with answering questions, I mean, I don't know, I guess it's a workshop, so anybody can start. The first one where it says want to keep the same architectural styles in the CRA, I would like to see personally the CRA, whatever we do outside the city is cohesive to the CRA. Whatever, that way, so whatever we've got, if we change the outside of the corridor, we need to match the CRA to the corridor, or we need to match the corridor to the CRA.
And you're saying you'd like to keep the CRA the same?
Well,
As the
I'm not
rest.
saying, if we need to, no, I'm saying that
You're
whatever we
just
do, we
Do
need
it
to make them
together.
Got it.
cohesive.
Got it.
Well,
Agree.
I'm a big fan. I'm a big proponent, much like the mayor, is the Spanish Mediterranean revival style. That is really, and I've noticed a lot of the new buildings. I didn't know if our planning department or permitting department or anybody has said anything, but there has been kind of that Florida style in the buildings going up. I've noticed even the apartment buildings are brighter, more of a Florida flair to it. And so, I think even if we did keep other architectural styles, if we pushed as staff possibly, hey, this is our number one choice here. You really want to be friends with everybody, here's where you want to go. If you don't, then you can do one of these other two, but you may not go with the aesthetic of the city. Mayor Cole.
I love that same style too, but I would like to point out that we just built a Craftsman style. You know, basically the garden center is a Craftsman style.
It is,
building.
you're right. It's little, but that was before we kind of started these conversations
Yes.
too, to just try to get that building going for the people. So, and you know, it will come a time where it'll need some upgrades and some updates in a few years, and we'll just maybe start changing it then a little bit.
And you've got the old bank building and Roberts Hall. Those are two very different styles, but they blend because
Right.
they're
Right.
there. So
It's old
I think
Florida.
Ben wanted
Yep.
to add something.
I just wanted to mention, and basically in a nutshell, the CRA Design Guidelines, they really focus on the architectural style and then also the color selection. And you'll probably notice this on a lot of the commercial businesses here in the downtown area. The experience we made with talking to other businesses, Walmart, I mean, large corporations about the architectural design guidelines, it's not really a big issue for them because 9 times out of 10, they have maybe 4 or 5 different design patterns already developed. And usually one of these design patterns matches our design criteria. So if they submit something to the city, it's probably their preferred brand. CVS Pharmacy is a perfect example. We just went through this. Walgreens Pharmacy, same thing. They went through they submitted some information or some design patterns, and we said, no, this is not really 100% compatible with our design guidelines. So they went back and pulled out design number 2 and said, here, how about this one? They already know that corporate is okay with that. It's just a different design. It's not going to be more expensive for them because they already ran the numbers. It's
Right.
just a different type of design that still meets their corporate identity patterns.
Right.
So
Yeah, those buildings are kind of like modular homes, right? They're put together,
yes.
you know, they're
So it's not an
necessarily
extra
built.
burden on them just because Lynn Haven comes up with this unique design. It's not.
Right.
No.
Right.
I personally, I think it's what, I don't put words in your mouth, Commissioner Aldridge, but it sounded like that's what you were saying. But I personally like the look. I think what the charm of Lynn Haven is this part that we're sitting in right now.
Mhm.
And I think that it would be much more fortuitous to everyone if we took this design, this look, and expanded outward rather than
Right.
coming in. That's my
Mhm.
thought. I don't know what yours is.
That City Hall look right there.
Yep.
Yes.
Or the old City Hall.
Or the old City Hall. That's right. That's right.
I said that, now somebody else
No,
needs
no,
to say
No,
something.
I'm completely in compliance with you, or
Mhm.
agreement with you. And I think we've just actually answered the first 2 questions together,
Mhm.
I think.
And we can build these into this Orange County
Mm-hmm.
template, so to speak, that we
Mhm.
have, you know, and just change it to our vernacular and what we're wanting. And I think we're onto something there.
And I think applicable to what, of course, new development, maybe redevelopment and renovation, but even existing, I think if we really used a cordial outreach and told everybody what we're trying to do, we're trying to build our city back, we're trying to bring more people in, bring more business to you. As you think of repainting or whatever you do in the future, would you be amenable to trying to match this and reach out to the businesses that are already there? And
Right.
they might be willing to do that. So.
So when it comes to that next question and about the applicable to new development, redevelopment, and renovation, I would say all of the above for me. I mean, of course, I qualify that with if they pull a roofing permit, no, I don't think we should be able to force them to change the facade, you know, but if they're doing 50%, I would say, yeah, you need to comply. You know, forcefully comply, not, you know, I mean, I agree with the mayor. If they come to us a permit and say, hey, listen, I want to, I don't know, put a new roof on, you know, hey, listen, if you're painting, would you please consider? I think that's a really smart idea. But on the forceful side, I think that we need to be looking at, you know, probably a 50% line.
Right. And I think the force can come as time goes by. The more buildings that are following this ordinance, the harder it is for a single build to say, well, wait a minute, you know, because you're like, well, what about everyone else? So we can add more teeth, so to speak, as we go along here, if we see people aren't wanting to comply. But I don't see it being an issue. I think everybody really wants to see Lynn Haven look great. I really do.
I actually have a question for our city attorney. The CRA obviously has some guidelines right now, and to me that tells me that I don't have a lot of teeth right now to enforce this. Almost all of the time, the business owner is willing to work with me, and I don't think I was ever challenged to, by a business owner saying, hey, these are just guidelines. So I don't know exactly how much this could be enforced, really, and that's maybe something the city commission should take a look at and to see if we may need to change some of the wording in the land development code, so that worst case that we actually can do something about this.
Just a quick question. I mean, I know we don't have anybody for the building department here at the moment, but don't anything in the CRA that requires a building permit, don't they have to have a sign off from the CRA before? So that's your teeth, is we don't issue them a building permit.
That's a big question been asked, but I certainly think Ben and I can look and see what issues specifically may have, but ultimately the CRA can enforce the conditions. We can look at what's implemented now and if we need to improve it going forward. But I mean, it's kind of a side question to the workshop here today.
Yeah, the CRA would be like a state and the federal government. I mean, you know what I mean? You're still, our ordinance would still be preemptive even over CRA, so they would have teeth to enforce what we passed, is what you're saying there.
We could make the CRA guidelines the same.
Right, right, exactly. It's the law of the city. Exactly right. Regardless if it's CRA or not, it's kind of going back to what Commissioner Russell was saying. It flows regardless if it's CRA or not. It's going to flow through those barriers. Right. Yes. Even though CRA does have some extra little leeways, that the normal doesn't have. Right. For other things, yes. So, does that make sense?
Other comments?
Mayor, I answered yes to everything, and the three styles are okay with leaning toward the Mediterranean. I do want to make sure that we have a separate workshop and look at signage and landscaping to match the decor of the buildings and enforce it. I think landscaping is an easily value engineered thing in developments, and it doesn't get all the way through. So we need to put some teeth in landscaping and possibly develop an ordinance for landscaping as well. So
we currently have the landscaping ordinances within the ULDC. So what we have now in the ULDC is the law, and they're supposed to do it. So when we are having that workshop, I'll make sure that you will have copies of what's there now, what we have now. But you're right in that landscaping is one of the most tricky areas, because they'll bring me a landscaping plan for review and I'll review it, and they'll get permission, if it's correct, or they'll have to change some things. And they're supposed to put a specific number of plants, like canopy trees, understory trees, and shrubs per 100 linear foot each for each perimeter, for each boundary, and the width of that buffer and the number of trees is dependent upon the land use or the type of road that they're on. So they bring me a plan and I review it, and I'll approve it when it's how it should be. They'll go out there, they'll put the landscaping in, I'll go out to review the landscaping, and it won't have been planted the way it was supposed to have been planted on the plan. They'll have put trees that were supposed to be at the front behind the dumpster, because they never want to put anything out front, because they want everybody to see their building. And then I'll oftentimes tell them that, no, I'm not going to pass this, and they want their CO. Now the pressure is on the building department, and people will contact the commissioners because these people want their COs. And I'm saying, but it doesn't meet what you said it was going to be. So no, don't give them their CO. So then they ask for a temporary CO. And it's one of the trickiest areas because the developers just don't seem to take it seriously. They don't want to buffer their buildings. They want their buildings to be seen. And then they'll come up with things like, well, you know, on the plan, it said that all these trees were going to be in this corner, but we couldn't put them there because that's where we put our sign or whatever. Well, they should have put their sign somewhere else. So, and that's us, I think. There needs to be more coordination. I need to make sure that when someone brings their sign permit application, we're looking to make sure they're not putting their sign where they're supposed to be putting plants. You know, they put
Right.
their sign somewhere else. So that's why it's definitely an area I think that needs to be looked at, and we need to have the teeth to be able to make them do what they're supposed to do.
I think we have an opportunity just to really enforce that, and also possibly incentivize for planting trees in the future that we need. So we might be able out of this next workshop to develop a
That would be great.
yep
Yeah.
and an incentive to do, you know, for landscaping packages that include so many of the larger trees that we need to replant or something like that. So
I'd like to mention also that enforcing the landscaping at the development side is a moot point if we're not going to make them maintain it. So we've got to make sure that if we're requiring them to put the landscaping in, there needs to be something that tells them they have to maintain it. You know, when the tree dies, they take it out, throw it away, and then it's gone. So we've just wasted our, spinning our wheels trying to make a plant thing to begin with. So I mean, that's something else we look at, make sure that we've got the teeth to be able to do that.
is that a code issue? Code
I
enforcement?
don't know
Don't
if we
know,
have
yeah.
anything in
Yeah.
power to, within a year. Okay.
What about irrigation? Do we have any kind of code about if you're planting X amount of feet, you have to have irrigation? I guess they would never have to turn it on, but it might help.
But it's not
And
going to live
some-
without, it's not going to live without the
It's
irrigation.
not gonna live without it.
No,
so-
but some landscaping is zero irrigation too.
Yeah, if they
Yep,
were to use
yep.
like natural Florida, stuff that was in Florida, then they wouldn't need as much
Right.
irrigation.
Yep.
Tire Kingdom that just went in, I asked that they had to move some of their trees because they had put trees behind the dumpster that were supposed to be on the front. But they did do that over the weekend before they got their CO. But they've actually taken insurance out on their plants for, I can't remember, I think he said 5 years. So they took insurance out on there. So he said, yeah, we'll be watching these, and if they die, because especially, you plant them this time of year, you're not really sure what they're going to do. But they are fully intended to, make sure that their trees and plantings are okay.
A little off the subject, is there anything in our code that requires them to shield the dumpsters? There is, okay. I know that was one of my questions, because I can think of two places right now that I look at the dumpster as I drive down 79.7.
They shouldn't get their COs unless the ones that are grandfathered in, but any new development, they shouldn't be getting their COs. They think of these things as just little things, and that we're being petty when we try to make them do these things. And but we're going to have our grand opening, and we've got people stocking the shelves now. And they're like, well, you just have to wait. You shouldn't be until you've met all our rules.
And it'll only take one or two of saying no, to be honest, for it to get word to get out. Hey, they're not playing. They don't do that. I don't think they do that necessarily with the beach and these other areas on Back Beach Road or the county. When they come in there and do it, the county says, no, you can go somewhere else if you don't like it. And you have to have laws and stand by them.
But-
I mean,
That's why
But-
this is really good, because you're all a team here who are going to be putting these things in place. And so, I know that when we say, no, sorry, then they can call whoever they want. And we've got your support.
That's important. And that's what I was just fixing to say is we need to remember that when we stipulate what has to happen, code enforcement goes out and does their job. This board, this commission has to have their back. We can't have, and this is my opinion, but I'll tell you what I'm going to do. If somebody calls me and says, hey, listen, I got a ticket because I did this. Did you break the rules? Yes. Well, what do you expect me to do about it? I'm not going to go try to talk the city into fixing something. I'm going to tell the business owner, fix the problem. So, I mean, this commission has got to be unified in supporting our employees, in my opinion.
The question, the workshop on landscaping, thank you, Commissioner, and sign requirements. If we could, there's one question I would like to know before we do that. Highway 77 is just so ugly to me when I look at it. And I've been looking at, especially on the East Coast, some of the communities, and they plant such a large number of trees and shrubberies that when you drive down their main corridors, you can't really see the businesses unless you look for the signs, and the signs are strategically placed. So I'm wondering if, if there are laws, ordinances from FDOT, what's our right of way, what's our rights on 77 as we're planting trees. That might be a really good spot down both sides just to kind of camouflage some of the ugliness. So we have a tree corridor to drive down instead of all that. So my thought.
Yeah, I agree. Like Rosemary, when you go
We're going to plant trees anyway.
I mean, we can't, if it's an FDOT right of way, then I guess FDOT have the say as to what goes in their right of way, but we can make the property owners, when they're developing or whatever, we can make them plant the trees and the number of trees that we want, and we can, they'll have to have the kind of signage that you want. When it comes to having that nice look, that streamlined look, what do you think, Ben? I mean, would FDOT let us, if we have enough land either side of the road, the street? Because, sorry, Ben, we kind of have that down by, where the Healthplex was?
Yes.
Down there on the right-hand side, and that's lovely, but that's nice. That's deep there, isn't it? And a lot of what we have isn't as deep. We don't really have that kind of.
And not trying to block their businesses from people knowing they're there, because we know they're there, but we don't necessarily want to look at them when we're not going there, so.
DOT has a highway beautification program, and they have been making changes over the years to the types of plants and trees that are allowed within the DOT right-of-way, and unfortunately they continue to limit the number and the types of trees that are allowed. The main objective, DOT's main objective, is transportation or traffic safety, and so that's the main argument that I received from their professional landscaper, that they don't allow these trees within the right of way anymore unless you have a curb and gutter, and even then the tree cannot be an oak tree, but it can only be a crepe myrtle and things like that. So even on the shrubs, they changed the rules to that they would only allow shrubs that don't grow taller than 18 inches.
So this could be a legislative question that we need to get our
Probably,
representative to get on.
yes.
Okay.
Mayor, we are in the process of beautification for 77, and so we've already submitted some plans or therewith, and so we probably will get some feedback on that. Is that correct, Chris? In terms of how the plan we put together to beautify 77. So that'll give us a lot of direction of what we put in place and what can and cannot be there.
In other parts of Florida, I'm seeing them on, I'm seeing these huge trees on the right of way, and it's the same state. So it's got to be allowed.
Yeah.
Even Destin and Fort Walton.
I even picture you going to Rosemary when you first pull in there, right? And there's all those trees over the sidewalks. And there's nothing special about that. It's a road, a sidewalk, and a tree. Okay, they just trim them to where it creates a canopy. Is all they're doing.
I think it's a county road, though.
That could be a county road. Yes, very possible. Yes, I think you're right. It's a county 38. Right, that's what she was just saying. It's a county road over there. Yep, that's right.
But even on the 4-lane highway driving through Okaloosa and Santa Rosa counties and all, there are a lot of trees and things that block the ugliness of some of them. So there's got to be some leeway there. I think. Anything else? We'll close the workshop and take a moment. Or thank you, Ms. Richard, for your work on this, and thank you, Ben, for answering our questions. Thank you, Ms. Gaynor, for all your work for today. And we're not done yet, but here we go. Thank you.
One more time.
One more time.